3, but everyone else. What is their role? What is their actions? What are they doing in the play? And what are their traits? Traits meaning what is their personality? Are they intelligent? Are they conflicted by different decisions? Are they loyal? All of those things are traits, right? Every person has a trait. For example, your trait might be that you are intelligent, or your trait might be that you are humorous, you are funny. Everyone has a certain trait, and the traits in this play are important because they paint the whole picture of the whole play for the audience to understand. Now, you'll see at the bottom as well, there's a small guideline on how to create your mind map. And then if you turn to page 4, there's a small block that I gave you in order for you to create your own mind map on one of the other characters. Now, I want to challenge you as a learner. Don't do it on the 3 main characters. Try to make a character sketch on the minor characters that's in the play. It's going to be difficult because we don't have much to understand about them, but a lot of them actually have a role in the play. As we have seen with Reverend Bopa, he has a role in the play. We don't know his traits really, but we can derive from him being a reverend what type of traits he has and what is his actions and all of those things throughout the play. Now we get to the themes. Right, so as you can see a question mark, this is also one of the important questions. Right, we are going to break down the question paper in a few minutes based on everything that we've learned, but themes. There are many themes that are prevalent in this whole play. Now, from the school side, if one of the learners or even the educators can just write down one of the themes that they think is important throughout this play. We already highlighted the one, which was the education system. We also highlighted another one, which was the societal system, such as apartheid. But are there any others that you'd like to highlight for the rest of the schools and for the rest of your peers? So I just jotted down a few themes that I think is important throughout this play. There are many more, but when you are studying for this genre, it is important that you know the themes. The themes are the easiest to understand because the theme just basically stands for what is this whole play about? What is the foundation of the play? For example, if we are building a house, now we use the play as a house, the foundation would be the theme of the play, and then the bricks and everything else would be the characters and the storyline and the plot and the climax and all of those things. Right? But the foundation is what this whole play is built upon. So the themes of this whole play is the following. This is not limited to. Right, so it's education as a pathway to freedom. We are now talking about how Mr. M saw education as a way for the learners to actually escape the circumstances that they are in. The struggle against apartheid's oppression that we can see with Tami and Tami's friends and the group that basically started the riots. Finding hope in difficult circumstances. Again, we're talking about Tami and Isabel, where they're trying to find hope in the difficult circumstances that they've found themselves in, and the despair of lost opportunities. Again, despair of lost opportunities, we're referring to now Mr. M. We're referring to how he saw education as a way out, and how he was very disappointed when he saw that the learners were not attending school. There's one humorous part, I think that's in Act 2, where he's walking down the street on his way to school when the riots broke out, and he sees a young boy spray painting on a wall. And the irony, or the funny part of it, was that the young boy stops and turns around to Mr. M and asks Mr. M if he spelled the word properly. Which just shows us again about how education was important, but for them, it was more important for them to find freedom and then education. So all of those themes are what you actually have to delve in deeper into. It's not that hard. You just have to understand the play, understand the story, in order for you to actually answer all of these questions. Now, when we are talking about the themes, right, there's something called a timeline. I like to use timeline because it helps me to understand when every situation is taking place. And I like to teach my learners as well to make use of timelines. If we look on page 2, so now we're actually moving to the front, there's a timeline that I created for you to understand the key events that happens in every act and every scene. Right, so there are 10 key events, and all you have to do is just list 2 key events from the start, right, and then 2 key events by number 9 and number 10. towards the end, and their page and the act reference. This is important because it leads to when we are answering the question paper and we are talking about the extract. It is important that you maybe don't know the whole book out of your head, but you know what happens in every act and every scene, you know the main points. Because when you are reading the extract, it's easier for you to pinpoint and be like, I know that one, or I know which act or which scene that comes from. Instead of you knowing the whole book or the whole novel, the whole play verbatim, you know certain points or you know certain key ideas. Now, apartheid's impact on the themes of education and relationships is it highlights how apartheid severely limits education opportunities. Relationships, we see that Tami and Isabel's relationship becomes severed because of the impact of apartheid. They become close friends, but because of what's happening in the riots and because of Tami's stance on the whole riot, their relationship becomes severed as well. And then we also see in the future there are different narratives and different ways that things can change in society, divide society up. Now, once you have created that timeline, it's an easy way for you to actually see how much you actually do understand about the play. Because it's easy for you to say, okay, this is what the whole play or the whole book is about. But when you actually have to list every key event from every scene, it does become a bit more difficult. And that is one way for you to actually understand what's happening in each play. Because you actually have to go and read the play or go read the scene or go read the act to understand and to give the main key events of every scene or every act. Now we get to the question paper. Right, so this question paper was taken from November 2024, and this is just an extract. So here we're just going to focus on the questions that are a bit difficult to understand, and I will try to break it down and make it easier for you to understand as a learner. So this is the extract that you will get. The extract is usually just a snippet from one of the scenes or one of the acts of the play. Right, they're not going to give you the whole act or the whole scene as you have dealt with at the start of the year. You've seen it. They just give you a small piece. But that's why it's important for you to know the main idea of every scene and every act, so that when you read the extract, you're able to place it where it should be. So in your head, you can be like, oh, okay, this is where Isabel and Tami were talking in the classroom after the debate competition, for example. Or this is where Mr. M was talking to Tami in the classroom. All right, so as you can see, I will just say extract G, and then it will have in brackets, it will have the, let's say, the body language or the facial expression of Tami and Isabel. As you see here, it says Tami and Isabel are relaxed. So it means that they're calm. Right, and that's how the whole scene or the whole act is playing out. They will just give you just enough for you to understand, but what's important to note is that some of the questions answers will be in the extract and some of it won't. So meaning the extract is there just so that you can actually jog your memory and for you to understand, okay, this is where the whole questions are going to be headed. But it's not like a comprehension where you'll find all of the answers in the extract. You yourself has to understand the scene, understand the act, understand the themes in order for you to answer the questions that follows. Now we have question 1. So question 1.4.1.1 is the infamous table. Now why I call it the infamous table? It's one that is supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be a way where you can earn good marks, but because they don't really focus on the main characters, a lot of the time they focus on the minor characters. This is where we don't actually earn marks. So as you can see there are many characters that is not familiar to some of us because they're minor characters. We know Tami, we know Isabel, and then we have Mr. Mayatala, I hope I pronounced it correctly, and Mr. and Mrs. Makatini. As you can see, they're minor characters in this whole play. Those two are minor characters in the whole play. They don't really have dialogue, or they have little to none dialogue, but they are important to the whole spectrum of the play. Now, if I can ask one of the schools to just answer A, who is Miss Makatini? Right, just matched up to column B. So you can either say A, B, C, D, or E. And while you guys are typing, I'll also explain. Most of the time, or what I've noticed, and a lot of you learners might have noticed in the mock trials, they don't really focus on the major characters because everyone knows the major characters. They focus on those minor characters. So I see someone says C is the fed cook seller. Does anyone else disagree? I don't think anyone else is agree. So it is C. Miss Makatini was the fed cook seller. And then B, who was Mr. Maya Lataya? I'll give that answer. So it's B. No, it's A, sorry. He organizes the debating competition. So as you can see, these are all minor characters that we don't really deal with only at the start or in the middle or at the end of the play, but they are important because they basically lay that, as I said before, the foundation for the story to actually build up the house that we are metaphorically building right here. Now, another question that a lot of the learners struggle with, and as we went to the start, which is the tone question. So again, taken from the November 2024 paper. So refer to lines 17 to 20. Mapikwana, he clears South African natives. So what tone would Tami use in these lines? Now the tone question is very important, right? Because it's a question that they will always ask in your exams. The tone question is usually 2 marks. And tone refers to the writer's mood or feelings in the text. So a lot of you might have heard your teacher say, I don't like the tone of your voice, or your parents say, I don't like the tone of your voice. Tone refers to the way that you are saying things, right? As a mood that you're getting across. If you want to be cheerful with someone, your tone will be cheerful, right? It will be a bit more happier. If you are upset at someone, your tone will be angry, right? If you are trying to explain something to someone and they don't get it, after a while your tone will be frustrated. Like you can't understand why they don't understand what you're trying to say. Right? So this question talks about that, the mood or the feeling that the character or the writer is trying to get across. So what tone would Tami use in these lines? So this question is basically asking of you to say, how would, if say for example you were Tami, what tone would you be trying to get across to the character that you are talking to? So are you trying to get an angry tone across? Are you trying to get a cheerful tone, a happy tone, a sad tone, a frustrated tone? So what tone would Tami use in these lines? And how would he say the line? So the tone that you'll be using is confident or boastful. So when someone is boastful, it basically means that they are bragging, right? To put in easier terms, they are bragging. A lot of the times, I'm a sport guy, I love soccer, so most of the time when Liverpool wins, I'll be bragging to all of my friends, right? I'll be boastful about it. Right? If United wins, my friends will be boastful about it. So boastful is bragging. So this whole tone right here would be a bragging tone, but you can't say bragging, so we use proper English words such as confident or boastful to explain the tone that Tami will be using in that line. So again, tone refers to the writer's mood or feelings in the text, and then the rest of the question is, how would Tami say the line? Would you say it in a shy tone? Would you say it in a happy tone? But we already understood that we say it in a confident and boastful tone. Right, and then we continue to the next question. The irony question. Right, this is usually 2 marks. Now this is where I want to stop. Now the irony question is one that is very important, but it's one where you either get the answer or you don't get marks at all. So it's either 2 marks or no marks. There's no 1 mark or 1 mark here for something. It has to be correct. Now, irony is not what you expect, the opposite happens. So when something is ironic, the opposite happens. Now, I grew up in a small city, a small town called Eitzach, right? And a lot of the times in my community, there was a lot of ironic things that happened. Now, in my classroom, I like to use the example. The ironic thing that happens in many of our communities is the following, that you have a builder. Right, the builder goes to fix everyone's house, but then their house is still incomplete. Or the mechanic, my favorite one, a mechanic fixes everyone's cars, but their car is still broken. That is irony. That's the opposite. Another simple example is a car salesman sells cars, but he or she does not have a car. Right, so it's not what you expect. That is irony. The opposite happens. Right, so explain the irony in Tami's words. I was sent temptations and troubles. Now you see those 3 dots there, it's an ellipse. It means that the sentence continues, but they condense the sentence so that it's easier to understand or to add in the question. Now it's your duty to actually go to lines 24 and 26 and go and read the rest of the sentence so that you are able to understand what the irony is in the question. Right? So explain how the opposite occurred to what is being said. So with the irony question, you have to explain what is ironic and what is the opposite that occurred based on that irony. Right, so for example, if I had the silly example that I used about the salesman that didn't have a car, I would have to explain in full what does the irony mean there. Right, for example, the salesman sells cars on a daily basis to customers, but he himself does not have his own car. Right, so that's me explaining the irony that's happening in the whole sentence. I'll show you the memo quickly on how we mark this type of question. So I'll just stop sharing my screen quickly. Right, so it's this one right here, 4.1.7. As you can see, it's 2 marks. And then both parts must be included to earn marks. So both of the parts of this answer right here has to be included in order for you to earn the 2 marks. If one part is missing, just erase there, then you cannot get any marks. That's why it's important for you to explain the irony answer in full in order for you to earn 2 marks. So the answer is Tammy's parents send him to Brakwater to keep him safe, yet this is where he experiences unrest or boycotts. This conjunction here is important. The yet or because or anything like that, that conjunction basically tells us that there's a change in attitude or a change in the answer. So you're not just going to give 2 sentences, you have to connect it with a conjunction. So for example, Tammy's parents send him to Brakwater to keep him safe. That is what we expect. Right? For example, we expect the salesman to have a car. Yet, this is where he experiences unrest and boycotts. So that's the opposite that happened for the parents. So you have to say what was expected, and then you have to explain what actually happened. So what was expected, and then explain what actually happened in order for you to get those 2 marks. If you just say, Tammy's parents sent him to Brakwater to keep him safe, you get 0. Or if you just say, this is where he experiences unrest and boycotts, you get 0 because there is nothing that's linking the irony in actual fact to the rest of the question. So that ironic question is one that is very easy to understand. It is one where you can score a full 2 marks, but it's important that you explain what is expected to happen and what actually happened. Right, let's continue. Just go through my presentation. Right, then they will provide you with a second extract. So the first extract will have a set of questions, and then you have a second extract that will have a set of questions. Now, what's important to note is that each extract deals with a different part of the play. It's not necessary to say that because they gave you extract out of Act 1, the next extract is going to be out of Act 1 as well. They could use an Act 1 and an Act 2, or they can use a scene, Act 1, Scene 3, and then an Act 1, Scene 1. It's all up to the examiner. But what's important to note is that you read the extract, and that you understand what the extract is about or how it links to the different parts of the story or where it actually places in the story. Because maybe the first extract was about the start of the play, but the next extract is about the end of the play. So that's where you have to actually link the 2. Then we have question 3, which is basically question 4. This is also 2 marks, right? So this is one of the questions where it is easy actually to score marks, but a lot of the learners don't actually interpret the question correctly. So this is not the same type of question as in the cartoon where you have to show facial expressions. This is more body language, right? So if you were the director of this play, what would you tell Mr. M to do when saying Mr. M and useless, useless, useless? State 2 actions. So if you are a director, a director directs actions. A director doesn't direct facial expressions. He or she directs actions. He tells the cast or the characters where to stand, how they should actually act out the lines or the scene. And in this question, you must explain how you as a character would act out the scene. So what I like to tell my learners is put yourselves in the shoes of the character. How would you actually act out this type of line or act out this type of dialogue, right? Nowhere here do you have to speak about facial expressions. You are talking about body language. For example, if I'm sitting in a classroom and I'm Mr. M and I'm shouting useless, useless, useless. Then my two actions would be Mr. M is lifting his arms up in the air and banging on the table, shouting useless, 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 or Mr. M is standing with his hands on his hips, right, and then waving his finger. That's my second action, to say useless, useless, useless. So all of the actions basically have to relate to body language because the director deals with actions. He doesn't deal with facial expressions. So the two cannot be mixed. When you're talking about the cartoon in paper one, there you're going to speak about facial expressions and about body language per se, because you're trying to explain to the reader what is happening in the cartoon. But here you are now in the role of the director and you're trying to put on a performance for the audience. So that way you will actually try to get them to act out all of the expressions that's happening. So when they say state two actions, you're talking about body language, and you're not talking about facial expressions. Okay? If you turn to page 6 in your booklet, you'll see that there's a tone and mood activity. So I provided you with different dialogues based on what the person has said. Right? So different people have said different dialogues throughout this whole play. And then there's space for you to add the tone, going back to the tone question, right? And then explain why this tone is appropriate. Right, so you'll see example of tone is serious, humorous, angry, frustrated, and hopeful, and explain why you think the tone is like that. So why do you think the tone is like that? Okay, but with this activity, you can also add what action you would actually have the character doing. So for example, I will not be a puppet of the system, exclamation mark. What action would you have the character actually doing? So now you're not just interacting with the tone, you're actually now interacting with the body language and acting like the director. This is a 2 marker, right? 1 mark for each action, but it is an easy 2 marks for you to get by just basically explaining the body language. But what's important to note is the body language has to connect to the line or to the statement or to the dialogue that's being provided. If someone is using exclamation mark, the body language can't be passive, it can't be chilled, it can't be someone laying back on the chair. If someone is shouting, it has to be them standing up, maybe hands banging on the chest or a bold fist even, just to show that they are angry. Now we get to one of my favorites, the figures of speech. Okay? So the figures of speech, which is on page 9, is one where they ask a lot of questions based on the figure of speech. So they'll provide a dialogue, and then you have to say what is the figure of speech of this dialogue. So parts of speech relates to language and grammar. So parts of speech talks about words. Like for example, common noun, proper nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverb of time, all of those things are parts of speech. Right? It basically puts every word into an umbrella or into a different section. Figures of speech refers to colorful language. Right, so example, alliteration, personification, metaphors. We use figures of speech to add color to our writing. Without figures of speech, a lot of the writing will be boring and bland, and the reason we use it is to actually make it come alive. Right, so there are different figures of speech that you have learned from grade 8 up until grade 12, but the predominant ones that we always talk about is things such as alliteration, personification, a metaphor, onomatopoeia, simile, and assonance. So, on question 4, as you can see, these are usually the type of questions that we actually do get. Right? So, question 4. You once told me that it was almost as good as music. Don't you remember? Oh. Right? So, our first mark would be identify the figure of speech used in these lines. Right? So, when we are talking about figure of speech, we have to go look at the rules that the figure of speech provides. Right? For example, a metaphor compares two things, but a simile compares two things by using like or as. Alliteration is a repetition of letters or the first letters. Assonance is the repetition of consonants or vowels. All of those things we have to know the rules. If you don't know the rules of the figures of speech, then you are not able to answer a figure of speech question. I've seen a lot of my learners use the default. Right? They just look at it, and then they just say, okay, it's a metaphor. Okay, it's a simile. But you actually have to understand why it is a metaphor and why it is a simile in order for you to answer the question. Right? So A would always be 1 mark, identify the figure of speech, that will be 1 mark. Right? And then this 2 marks will be for B. Explain why the figure of speech is relevant in these lines. So you basically, by B, have to explain what is the figure of speech, so why it is a simile, for example, and then how it is relevant in those lines. So why is that a figure of speech used in that line and nowhere else? How does it create color to the rest of the play? Or how does it actually bring that line to life? So you have to explain the literal meaning, so the real meaning, and you have to explain the figurative meaning, so basically the imaginative reason of why that line is being used or why that figure of speech is being used. So the answer I'll provide right here is a simile, right? And the reason why it is a simile is because it uses like or as to compare music, right? So the answer is a 2 marker, as I said before. You get 1 mark for saying it emphasizes how Tom enjoyed listening to the school bell in the past. That's the literal meaning, right? So I'll just put L there. And in the figurative meaning, which is symbolic of his love for education. So you get 1 mark for the literal meaning of the figure of speech, and you get 1 mark for the figurative meaning, right? So literal meaning in a real life or in the real world in the play, and a figurative meaning, which means imaginative or on a different level of understanding of this whole figure of speech. So it emphasizes our time enjoy listening to the school bell in the past. That's a mark. And then the second mark is, which is symbolic of his love for education, which is another mark. Now this one's a bit different from the irony question, because if you only have the literal meaning or just the figurative meaning, you can at least earn 1 mark. So it's not like the irony question where it's 2 marks or nothing. Here you can just get 1 mark. So if you don't understand the figurative meaning, at least write down the literal meaning of that sentence or of that statement. Vice versa, if you don't know the literal, only know the figurative, write at least down the figurative meaning. It's better to get 1 mark than no mark at all. All right, let me share my screen again. And if you do turn to page 9 in your booklet, you'll see that there's a figure of speech worksheet. I provided different statements of different people, and then all you have to do is write down the figure of speech and then give an explanation for that figure of speech. So practicing this type of question so that you can understand the question easier, because that is 3 easy marks that you can earn, right? That can aid you in doing well in the drama section of paper 2. The drama section is only 35 marks, but it is vital that you get these difficult questions correct as well. All right, then we'll just go through one more question that a lot of the learners struggled with, or a lot of my learners struggled with. I'll just share the question paper quickly. All right, so 4.8. All right. So this is a 2 marker. Sometimes it is a 2 marker, sometimes it's a 3 marker, or even a 1 marker. So refer to the drama as a whole. So when they say this, refer to the drama as a whole, they're basically saying you have to tap into your knowledge of the whole drama, of the whole play. So the plot, the characters, everything from Act 1 up until the last scene in the whole play. Right? Then they'll always provide you with a statement. So the statement is, Tami is exemplary pupil. Exemplary meaning Tami is someone that you can look up to. So you're a student right now, and you look at Tami's life or the way Tami do things, and he's someone that you can look up to, a role model. Discuss your view. So there's no right or wrong answer with this type of question. It's the way that you explain your answer. So you either have to agree or disagree with this whole statement that Tami was a role model, someone that a lot of learners can look up to. Now, what it is important to notice, you don't get a mark for agree or disagree. You don't get a mark for yes or no. You get those 3 marks for basically explaining why you think that he was a role model, or why you think that he was not a role model to different learners. So it's a 3 marker. So the way that I like to do it is that if it's 3 marks for such a type of question, you provide 3 statements or 3 reasons why you believe that he was a role model, or 3 statements against why he was not a role model to the different types of learners that Tami encounters or whoever's reading the play. So this is your view. Right, so it's no one else's view, it's your view. But what is important to note is that you're going to have to use your play as evidence. Now, if you are having an argument with someone, most of the time the arguments will end when they say provide evidence and then you can't provide evidence and then the argument is over. So you have to provide evidence. So if you say that Tommy is a great role model, right? Try and quote or try to find an example in the play that says that he was a good role model. Or if Tommy was not a good role model, try and quote or try and find evidence or try and explain a scene or act where it showed that Tommy was not a good role model. Because your evidence backs up your statement. Because it's easy for us to say that Tommy was exemplary pupil, but if we don't have evidence or we don't have statements or we don't have scenes or acts that actually support that whole statement, then how can we actually award you with the answer? So if we go to the memo, let me just check, that was question 4.1.8. So as you can see here, it's open-ended. So meaning we can accept any relevant response. Right, so they'll give us, the department or the government provides a guideline for the answers, but it's not limited to. So if you back up your statement very well, you provide evidence, you say this and that, and you provide good evidence and examples, you can get the full 3 marks. But if you only provide one sentence, we can only give you 1 mark or no marks at all. That's also another important thing to note. Do not leave questions open. Right, because most of the time the questions can maybe have the open-ended mark right there, and then we can provide you with 1 mark out of the 3 instead of providing you 0 marks out of the 3. So if you do say that he was a role model, you can say he was an obedient pupil, he worked hard to obtain good grades. Example is he's representing the school at debating. Right, even though he had his own opinions, he allows Mr. M to take decisions on his behalf. Another example you can provide from the play. And though he's not content with a bunch of education, he perseveres to standard 10. So he gets to, I think standard 10 is grade 11 or grade 12, if I'm not mistaken. Or, if you do say no, then you have to explain about Tommy's political involvement, how it interrupts his learning opportunities, where he stayed at home could be an example. Or how he openly challenges Mr. M in front of Isabel. Right? Or how he doesn't use his leadership or influence to bring the learners back to school. All of that is basically you providing your viewpoint. So when they say refer to the whole play, the play as a whole, you must step into different parts of the play to actually understand what is happening and for you to have good evidence when you are answering that question. And then as you can see here, you don't get a mark for yes or no, but you can have a combination answer. So meaning you can actually speak about yes and no in the same answer. So you could be on the fence basically, but you have to provide good evidence to back up your statement why you're on the fence. So using different, not extracts, but different statements or dialogues from the different parts of the play to actually back up the statement that you are trying to make. Okay. Bye. And then again, coming back to the figures of speech, you're going to have to understand what the figures of speech actually are, the rules of how to apply the figures of speech in order for you to answer this question well. This will always be a 3 marker, 1 mark for identify the figure of speech, and then 2 marks for explaining why the figure of speech is relevant in these lines. That is what's important to note. The same with the irony question. It's 2 marks or no marks. You have to explain what, in irony question, explain what is expected, and then you have to explain the opposite that happened in order for you to get the full marks. So what is expected? For example, it's expected that the mechanic's car should be working, but what actually happened is the mechanic's car is always broken. Right, so 2 marks. 1 mark for saying that his car must always be working, and the other mark for saying that his car is always broken. And then, good luck. The drama is only, as I said, 35 marks. It is an easy place for you to score marks or score points in your paper, but the only way that you are going to score those points is by actually working through the content, doing this booklet or completing this booklet that I have provided right here. It revises everything that you've done for the play, and it gives you a chance to actually see if you understand the work or if you're still lacking in a bit of knowledge. All right, let me just share the crossword puzzle with you that I have electronically. Right. So we have the crossword puzzle here. Alright, so we did number 1 and number 11. So we'll do number 2 quickly. Emotion Tami feels about these limited opportunities. So what emotion does Tami feel? Right, we're going back to tone. The tone I said was frustrated, so emotion would be is frustration. So Tami feels frustration towards the limited opportunities that he has been given. And then number 3, Mr. M's weapon to fight injustice. What does Mr. M use as a weapon to fight the injustice that the kids are going through or the learners are going through? What is their weapon? Right, so that weapon would be education. So that's 3 down. The weapon is education. Right, then we have number 5. A contest that brings Isabel and Tami together in the play. So that is easy. That is the debate. Number 6, a form of expression valued by Mr. M for change. So which way does what is the form expression that is valued by Mr. M that can bring about change? So that is speech. Right, so speech or dialogue, but we'll accept speech because it fits in the crossword. And then number 8, the white girl from a privileged background who befriends Tami. Everyone knows who's that. That is Isabel. Number 9, the bright black student torn between school and political struggle. That is Tami. And then we get to the across. Number 2, relationship between Isabel and Tami despite their differences. That is a friendship. Number 4, many of you that are doing the crossword will notice number 4 is long. So number 4 is dedicated teacher who tries to unite youth through education is Mr. M, but number 4 has Mr. M's full name. Right, so it's not just Mr. M, it's Mr. M's full name. There are a lot of us don't know, but at the start of the play or in the middle of the play, they actually say what is his full name and why they call him Mr. M. Right, when he's speaking to Isabel. And then number 7, Mr. M's tragic fate after his betrayal is revealed. So number 7 is a death. And then number 10, a setting where most of the play takes place, and that is in a classroom. Alright, so hopefully many of you have completed this crossword puzzle or will be completing it in your own time. And then the last thing would be the timeline that I've been speaking about. As you can see, start from the beginning of the play, such as Mr. M teaching and Tami's arrival, and then include key conflicts, debates, decisions, and climatic events, so important events that happens in every scene. And then it helps to see the sequence and understand the cause-effect relationship. So this will help you to understand why certain things happen throughout the play, and also help you to understand what is happening when. Right, so event number 1, we can say that Mr. M prepares his classroom and emphasizes importance of education. That happens in Act 1. That is the main thing of Act 1, Scene 1. That is where we see Mr. M in the classroom, and there he's talking about how education is important. Then number 2, another important scene is where Tami arrives late and argues about school restrictions. That's also in Act 1, Scene 1 or Scene 2, around there, where Tami arrives late at school and Mr. M gives him a verbal warning, because Mr. M sees school as important, but Tami does not because of what's happening in his society or community. And then number 3, Isabella observes students and Mr. M's teaching. That's in Act 1. That's when Isabel comes for the debate. And then Isabel and Tami has a debate, a very spirited debate, and Isabel wins. But then Tami actually shows Isabel a different side of the schooling and highlights the differences between the different schools. Number 4, it's the debate preparations. Mr. M guides Tami and Isabel. That is the end of Act 1 and the start of Act 2, where the Tami and Isabel are now teaming up for the debate. Number 5, Tami joins the student protest and resists authority. That is in Act 2. Number 6, the tensions rise between Tami and Mr. M. So now they are basically fighting. There's tensions between the two. Tami and Mr. M are now not sitting around the same fire. This is towards the middle of Act 2. And Tami is actually being very angry towards Mr. M because Mr. M doesn't allow him to make decisions for himself. Number 7, the debate takes place. Tami and Isabel participate in this whole big debate in Act 2. And then number 8 is now from Act 3, where the conflict and betrayal starts, where Tami rejects Mr. M's advice and starts to join the protest and doesn't go to school and is part of this group that is actually starting the protest and the riot. And then number 9, we find out about Mr. M's tragic fate. That's in Act 3. Towards the end, we find out that Mr. M was unfortunately killed. And then number 10, which is the last part of Act 3, Isabel reflects on the impact of apartheid and the youth choices. So as you can see, it's not all of the main ideas of every act and every scene. It's just the small parts of the main ideas that relates to the whole play and that flows. Right, so it flows to one another and helps me and helps my learners to understand how the different key events happen throughout the play. So it's not just one main thing, it's 3 or 4 main things of every act or every scene. You can do it per scene, but I did it per act because it is easier to understand. Right, I think that concludes the crossword and the timeline.
Good day, everyone. I am Mr. Vigeland, so I just want to extend greetings to our curriculum advisors, that is Ms. Hartel as well as Rhoda. And then thank you, Mr. Van Willing, for the insightful presentation. Then also want to greet our educators as well as our grade 12 candidates. So I'll be focusing on approaching your paper 2 exam in terms of studying short stories. So bear with me. So I'll focus on how to study, and I'm going to start with a pardon me. So I'm going to start off with the short story, for example, rejection, and I'm just using the short story to guide you through the elements of a short story. So if we look at the story rejection, for example, we look at the elements. So you can see it's stipulated on the left there. I'm going to go through the title, the setting, the characters, the plot development, the themes, the point of view, the style, the tone and mood, as well as a bit of figures of speech. So if you look at the title of rejection, I'll do a mind map here after, where we focus on, let's look at the analysis thereof. So if you look at the title of rejection, we see it as dismissing. What do we mean by that? Dismissing means there's no acceptance. You are not allowed. The setting, for example, takes place in Senegal. This you should do with all of your short stories, in fact, any literature. Then the characters, there's quite a few characters in rejection. We focus on the narrator, which is the mother of the house or the daughter. We look at Haba, Benito's mother. We look at Mudo, we look at Tamzir, Modo, we look at the Imam, etc. The plot development, we focus on the arrival of the Imam with the 3 men, and then the main action is when the news is broken of Mudo's passing basically, and then we look at the narrators, the way she vents. And then the themes in here, just to summarize the themes, we look at the culture, broken relationships, the betrayal that's happening, the point of view. The story is obviously told from the main character's point of view. The style here with is formal, and the tone and mood. So I just combine these two, where the tone would be, for example, gloomy, downhearted, depressed, and then the mood would focus on the sadness, the anger, the emotions, and it concludes obviously with the happy and optimistic aspect there. And then the figures of speech, we can highlight some similes. The hyperbole, I just put in the reference there, page 54. There's metaphors in there, and there's obviously rhetorical questions. Then when we focus on the mind map, if you use this summarizing viewpoint in a sense of just summarizing your analysis, or in terms of preparation, apologies. So Grade 12 candidates, I'd like you to just pin, to just pin or jot down the following when it gets to rejection. For example, for the short story, let's start on the left top hand corner. We'll go to the title. So obviously that is rejection. Then below that we have the setting, where I've just mentioned previously. That refers to the overall Senegal. And in the plot, we have, for example, the three men you can put in the, I hope I'm not too fast while jotting this down, Imam, and then the news of Mudo, as well as the narrator venting. Then left bottom corner, you can jot down the broken relationships, the betrayal, etc. In the bottom middle, we focus the point of view that would be or refer to your main character telling the story. And then I'd like to go to the top right there where you have the name of characters. So we look at the narrator first of all. We look at Taba, or if you want to pronounce it Daba. We have Benito, we have Benito's mother, we have Mudo, we have Tamzir, as well as Modo. And then figures of speech, you can pin down there for yourself. There's a simile, there's a hyperbole or hyperbole on page 54, metaphors, as well as rhetorical questions, which is in the story. Then the tone and mood, what's created in terms of atmosphere, what is being created in terms of feeling or emotion. So we can put down there as gloomy, we can put down it's a depressing tone, it's downhearted, and then mood, you can write the angry, sad, emotional, etc. And in the style, the story is most obviously told from a formal style, right? Then, if we just look at Evelyn, is another example. So if you go to the title, I mean, it is in the middle, but I want you to extend on the title left hand. So what does Evelyn mean? Most of us have done this when we analyze in our classes, right? So what does Evelyn mean? You start any title of a story with a meaning of, you try to infer, you try to just unravel before even reading. So Evelyn here refers to, you can jot down, it refers to life. You can forward slash strength. You can forward slash there a little bird. What does that signify to us? It means that in the story, she is a powerful person. She has strength. You can jot down the word radiance. You can jot down beauty, etc. So, in terms of meaning, you would say Evelyn then now means uplifting. So you can write down the word uplifting. In the essence, she also has strong qualities, right? Then we go down to the setting. The story takes place in Dublin, Ireland. Uh, it is obviously a more of a Catholic environment, a Catholic country. So this dates back to the early 20th century. If you go to the plot, like any other story, you have your your setting, which we've just covered, but it starts with your exposition. You have your rising action, you have your climate, you have your falling action, you have your resolution, etc. And then we move on to our themes to the left bottom. So in this story, I think you can draw many themes from here. I'll just highlight a few. So we have our family values. We have the memories or the memoirs of Evelyn. We have the domestic abuse. We have the part where she has the option to escape with Frank, or would she not and return and then fulfill her promise that she made to her deceased mother. Then we look at another theme of paralysis. That is what I would call to my candidates a juicy one, where you become dead inside, and then obviously the aspect of religion seen to the fact that it's Catholic based, right? Then the point of view, or the perspective the story is told from, is obviously third person. I'm going to move to the right top corner. The name of the characters there, I'll just highlight a few. We obviously focus on Evelyn, we focus on Frank, we focus on Evelyn's father. But we tend to neglect the of the following characters you can jot down is the mother of Evelyn. We look at Miss Gavin, which gave her a would I say part-time job to to bring in money to the home. We look at Ernest, the brother. We look at is it Harry? Yes, and then also obviously the priest. So I'm to focus on the figures of speech there, what we can highlight there. So you can just jot down a metaphor, for example. If you go to page 61 in the book Changes, you'll find some metaphors there. We look at euphemism, we look at rhetorical questions, as well as some simile, irony, as well as some satire, right? Then the tone and mood, again, the differentiation here. If we look at tone, we focus on what is so bleak about the story. We look at what becomes so depressing, as well as demoralizing, which is quite a strong word to use. And then on mood, I want to emphasize sympathy, anger, as well as in the end, we can conclude with being hopeful. You know, then the style of writing, um, this I don't want to get into metadrama now, but let's say the stream of consciousness, right? So if we look at the 20th century, we focus on the rhythm of the character. We look at the character's thoughts. We in their mind. We're reflecting on what the character in the story is actually going through. If that helps a bit, please do that with all other short stories when you revise. Then, what to do when you approach or get your question paper? I want to say start with reading the instructions carefully. You have about 10 minutes of reading time. That is after they've laid down the house rules in your school hall, commencing your exam. So you have a bit of free time whereby you read. So I want to focus on read only the sections of the question paper that pertains to you. Meaning that if you look at the FAL candidates, the first additional language candidates, you will have many sections in your paper. So you would most obviously only focus on the genres that you've covered. So thereby I also want to extend by saying, do not read the questions only because it will stress you out. So I would like for you, instead of reading the questions, read the extracts that pertains to you. So you select your questions, you go straight to the extracts so that you can gain context. When you gain this context, you are reflecting back at what you studied at school. And then only read the questions because this will help you see the links by the time you get to reading the questions or analyzing the questions before you start answering. So here's a little snippet of your layout in terms of the format of your paper. So you will get your instructions and information. That is point one. They tell you to read the entire paper, etc. But I want to focus on number two, where you either have a novel or you have a drama or a poetry. The reason why I want to emphasize this is because we have, for example, at my school, we have learners that would start with question one, which is not what we've studied. So in our context, we study the drama and short stories, right? In your context, it might not be the same. And I'm sure your educators will remind you which sections to focus on. So I've pinned the note on the right hand side. Only answer two questions, and the questions that you will be answering must pertain to the genres that you have covered as a class of 2025 with your respective language educator. Then, before you answer the questions, I don't want you, I need you to make sure that you understand what the question is asking you. So if you look at this little slideshow here, I have question words and I have explanation thereof, right? So I have two slides of this. So I've just highlighted with the help of Ms. Hartel what we need to focus on. So we have question words such as account for. I am not sure if you will be getting this in your exam, but that just simply means to explain. When you have to analyze, you're going to have to interpret. You have to look at positive, you look at negatives, for example, pros or cons, and you kind of compare that, right? Then when you comment on it is opinion based. When you are asked to define, you have to give a clear, a short meaning, a small definition basically. When you demonstrate, you have to give evidence, right? And then when you describe, you state words, and your words that you use here have to be descriptive, okay? And you focus on your main points. When you are asked to determine, you have to examine. So you look for evidence, you look for proof, and that is what you use. If you are asked to differentiate, you look at differences that qualify categories. What we mean by that is if you have one aspect, you have to give two different views of it. When you're asked to discuss, you're looking for information, you're looking for facts. You you just elaborate basically on that. And then when you are asked to argue for a certain statement, you thereby know that you have to find reasoning. So if you argue, whether you agree or disagree, you cannot only state that you agree or disagree. We want information on what you disagreeing with, what are you agreeing with, and then obviously why. And in the second slide, you will get this question where you have to explain whatever they ask you. So you have to make clear, you have to interpret, you have to give reason, you have to give meaning. If they ask you to give context of, they could also ask you to rather refer, for example, to a certain extract. That means you go to the extract, whether the information is in the extract or not, or you have to rely on the overall knowledge that you have studied. And then substantiate and motivate is quite similar. You have to give reason why, you have to prove, you have to verify, you have to give valid support, you have to use information that's given in the question to elaborate on the context, or you rely on your prior knowledge. And then this is where we lack overall, is when you are asked to discuss the title of the story. Does the title agree or disagree? Discuss if you have to be Mr. M. Discuss if you have to be Evelyn or whatsoever character. You have to reason based on the text. And more importantly, you have to state why. So it could be the character, it could be the writer. It depends on the standing point. Okay. Then, if we can continue, um, what do the examiners look for? What do the examiners look for in your answers? So you don't know who's going to be marking your NEC script. I mean, it's the whole Western Cape. So it's teachers obviously not in your region that will be grading you. So just a few points here. Your understanding of the literal meaning of a story. So what is we reading figurative, but for us to understand, we need to elaborate on the literal meaning, the actual meaning. So we therefore focus on the characters and the events. The events meaning the actions between characters, the place that takes place, who's involved, the characterization, for example, the relation between characters, um, told or written in a narrative form, usually to interest, it's either for amuse or it's either to instruct, or something could be hidden that you have to figure out and infer, you know. It describes a series of incidents, it gives you detail on what happened, what might happen, who was involved, and how events in the story is unfolded. Then the second bullet there, or the second point, your ability to recognize information in a short story. You can, grade 12 candidates, only recognize if you've read the story. You cannot only depend on your class educator, your subject educator, and only read it with them in the four walls where you know the class is. So you have to revise on your own as well and use the notes that they give you based on the analysis. Then, third point, you will be required to make inferences when you provide information. You might not be clearly stated, or it might not be clearly stated in the extract. Mr. Van Weiling mentioned it early on. You should not just see it as a comprehension, for example. They give you an extract, but you have to refer in your mind to the whole story that you've covered in your classes. So this then means that you use what you already know about the text as a whole. Therefore, I say again, you can only use what you already know if you on your own individually go read the story on your own multiple times and go through your analysis that was shared with you by a subject educator. Then your ability to make your judgments or to form your own judgments or your own opinion about the aspects of the story. For example, evaluation, the question of evaluation, where you will be asked, do you agree with the following statement? Or they give you a statement and they want you to agree and you have to elaborate. Or the statement could be false and they want you to substantiate or to prove why it is false. Therefore, you have to know the story. And then another bullet there, for the last point on this one, is your ability, where they're looking for your ability to respond to the emotional level of a short story. And I'm just using the tone and mood as a sample here, where it's quite difficult to answer a question if you are faced with explain the tone of the character, explain the tone of the extract, explain the mood of the character, or what mood's being created in the extract. Or they can ask you simply, use a whole story, and then you have to derive from that. All right. So, in terms of emotional, think of, I'm sure I've shared some. Um, okay, let me skip that. Apologies. In terms of emotion level, it's very descriptive. That's what I'm trying to say. So, you have to be able to describe feeling, you have to describe mood, you know, mood, feeling, tone, what atmosphere is being created. Okay. Um, then, my grade 12s. If I can highlight this, they probably tired of me hearing this when I say, they can only ask you certain types of questions in the exam. I mean, you've been writing this style of answering since grade 10. So you will get mix and match. So if you followed Mr. Van Willing in the previous setting, he used mix and match as well. You will get this in question 4. You will get this in question 5. Mix and match where you get characters, for example, and you have to find the description thereof. Note, you will only find the description if you know the story, if you know the characters. Thereby following, you have true and false. Um, when I used to write exams, it was either say true or false, and then you substantiate. Here, they can give you a true and false statement, and they ask you to substantiate, or vice versa, they can ask you for false. Multiple choice is quite easy. I think what you have to know to mind there is only select the letter that represents your answer. Um, and then the setting, we all know that that refers to the time of the play, the time and the place of the story. However, I want to add that if it gets to the setting and the extract, you have to focus on who is involved and then more per se, what is happening when and where. So, what we tend to neglect is if you look at the extract, focus on something is happening and when is that happening? It's either during or after an event and who is involved and where are they, basically. Then, when you compare characters, you have to know your characterization there. Um, then your state of mind, which is quite also, I feel it's a tough question, which you might get or that you will get in either question 4 or 5. Then figures of speech, we refer to your simile, your metaphor, your hyperbole, your hyperbole. refer to personification, or if you have onomatopoeia and you have to reason, extend that, motivate, substantiate, right? Then tone and mood, we've elaborated on tone and mood already. Tone referring to think think of sound, but think of descriptive words in what atmosphere is being created. And then mood, look at the feeling, focus more on the emotion in terms of descriptive words. Then irony, which is also a tough one. This question you will get, you only have, or you would only score 2 marks or 0 marks. So irony in this case is where you state something that has the intended or the opposite meaning of what's being phrased. So therefore you have to say what is and what is the opposite. So you have two contrary parts. If you state one, you will score 0 marks. So you have to state both, right? Then theme is basically, I mean, most short stories you can derive many themes. It's not just one specific one that's focused on the, if you have to study this one. So it revolves around the main idea that what can you draw from the story? What is the crux of this? What can I gather from it? And then the title is simply easy. I think that question would just be, is the title suitable or not? Or they'll tell you the title is suitable, and then you have to find context. You have to find context. You have to reason why the title is suitable. And then here's another challenging one, the open-ended question where they ask you to discuss your view, or if you had to be the character, or for example, the suitability of the title, which is an option in an open-ended question. I think I need to continue for time. I'm going to go to the next slide. So yeah, I want to share a sample of the final exam of 2024, whereby we look at a short story, Triumph in the Face of Adversity, for example. So what I want to do here is, I would like for you to follow me when I read through the little extract, and then I would like to analyze the questions, and I want you to actually underline, pinpoint, elaborate, jot down on what are we actually looking at, and then I'll ask you, or even your educators, to just try and answer in your booklet. I'm sure you have a booklet, and then we'll do the refocusing thereof. So, if we look at triumph in the face of adversity, so this is, for example, extract 1, question 5, right? So, triumph in the face of adversity. I'll read the extract for you. So, I told him, I expected him to feel sorry for me and offer his help, but instead, he said, you cannot allow your home situation to control you. You have to control your situation. I was very angry. How could he say that? It was so easy for him to judge me when he lived in a nice house, he drove a nice car, and didn't worry about where his next meal was going to come from. But how? Was all I could manage to say to him. Focus, he said, and that drove me up the wall. Sir, I really think that I should leave now. It is one thing to act concerned, but making a mockery of me is more than I am willing to take. That's what she said, and walked away towards the door. Tulisile, wait, he said, but I kept on walking. The following day, I did not go to school, and I told myself that I was never going back. Mm-mm. I knew that Mr. Nkwane would tell everybody about the situation, and the last thing I wanted from them was their pity, because it was not going to feed me, put clothes on my back, or even help me getting back my schoolwork or getting my school back on track. Apologies. Besides the fact that I was poor, didn't mean that I didn't have pride. That's such a beautiful description in writing. So, if we go to the questions, so here you can see the layout of the questions on the left, and then what we briefly discussed in terms of analyzing the questions. I'll go through that again. So, in 5.11, you'll see this column A as well as column B, right? So you will have Madlamini, you will have Tabi Singh, you have Zanele, and you have Tembikile. So on the right hand side, your options are a home buyer, a young sister, you have a thoughtful friend, as well as an old fashioned woman, and then an abused daughter in law. So I think I'll take probably 30 seconds to a minute for you just to try and answer that. So just jot down the letters that represent your answer in your little booklet. Okay, I'm sure you had enough time. If not, you're more than welcome to complete this afterwards, and your educators will share some marking guidelines with you. So, Madlamini in this case would be answer B, the old fashioned woman. Ntabi Singh would refer to a thoughtful friend, which means the answer is C. And Zanele would refer to the younger sister, which is answer B. And then lastly, Timbikile would refer to an abused daughter-in-law, which gives you answer C. So if you look on the right-hand side, we focus on the mixed match, which means it's a knowledge question. You have to know the characters. Otherwise, you would not be able to match the description. So I move on to 512, where you describe the time and place where this extract is set. So the 12 candidates focus on the extract and not so the story as a whole. So if you look at the analysis of this type of question, you look at where an event is happening and what is happening. If it's not happening during, and it's either happening before something or it's happening after something. So you have to phrase your question like that, or your answer per se. Something is happening before, during, or after. And then 513, I would like you to, so we're going to refer to line 3. So let's go back up to line 3, for example. You cannot allow your home situation to control you. You have to control your situation. She said she was angry. How could you say that? Okay, I'm overlapping into line 4. So in your question there, I would like you to highlight, refer to line, but I want you to focus on what the question is asking you. So the question is asking you based on character. State two challenges that Tulisila experiences at home. So if you analyze the question, the characterization based on the characters derived, based on their words, their action, what others say about them, or simply just the context they find themselves in, right? So if you look at challenges, what does that mean? So I need you to jot down a note there whereby you write the problems, for example. Challenges referring to the problems. Challenges referring to what obstacles is Tulisili facing at home or what difficulties she's facing. So challenges, problems, difficulties, or obstacles that she's facing. Right? Can I move on to 514? Why does Tulisile say that drove me up the wall? So if we go back here to line 8, that would say, focus, he said, and drove me up the wall. Sir, I really think I should leave now. This is one thing to act concerned of making a mockery of me. I'm not willing to take that. Right? So, in this sense, I want you to underline um, the word why. And hereby you have to elaborate based on the context that is given. Okay. So in this context, for example, she would say, how does she feel, for example? She is obviously, she's upset, she is humiliated, based on the sir telling her that. And then Mr. Bikwane, does he understand the situation? Is he sympathizing with the situation? Okay. So think of it in that sense. And now I want to elaborate on question 515, whereby we focus on irony. Um, many, many learners or many grade 12 candidates, they either score 0 or they score 2. It is up to you. So here, underline the word irony for me, please. If we look at the analysis there, you state opposing aspects, like I said earlier on. What are you saying? What is the intention of it? And remember again, you either score 2 or 0 marks. So when you underline the word irony, in the sense of, let's go to line 15. Line 15 says here, and the last thing I wanted from them was the pity, because it was not going to feed me, it wasn't going to give me clothes, it wasn't going to help me get my schoolwork back on track, etc. So in this case, Tulisile, does she want to be pitied? Yes or no? Does Tulisile want to be pitied here? So you agree with saying she does not want to be pitied. Then you already score 1 mark. Now, what is the opposite of that? Yet, what's happening in the background of the story? She's begging. She goes from door to door, when she goes in the neighborhood and asks for help, right? So, I think we can move to the next question, 516. One of the themes in Triumph in the face of adversity is kindness. It could be any other theme, but we just want to unravel this for you. So the theme is where you give examples of the evidence in the story. You go back to the story and you fetch, you collect, and you pin this down that you can relate. So always link what is in the story to answering your question. So discuss a theme here, for example. If you say kindness is a theme here that you're going to discuss, you're going to focus on Master DK gives to Lucille, for example, hope, comforting her, giving her bread to take home, for example. Okay. To Lucille's grandmother, what does she do? She gives her money. She lends her money basically, not to expect anything back. And if you want a third pointer for that third mark, you would say Mr. Atebe actually gave her a job. So that is now in the fish and chip shop, where he allows her also to take whatever's left over of the works day at the shop. She could take that home. So that's a simple question, a simple relation to the context of the story that I fetched to relate to answer the question. And then lastly, on this question one, question five, the refer to the short story as a whole. Remember, you must read the question carefully. It could be phrased differently. So Tulisile is a good role model. I think in June month they ask you, Mr. M is a good teacher, for example. So you now have to discuss your view. Tulisile is a good role model. So if you look at the analysis of the question, again, what can you use about the character? What is being described of the character based on the words? What is the character like? What does the character do? What does others, or what can others in the story, or even you say about the character based on what you've read? So, in this sense, I want you to put a note to the question or just jot down the note. You have to rely on your own knowledge. So, you have to know the story. So, rely on own knowledge. Just put that down there for yourself. Right? And then there's some answers which we'll do with the next sample of the story. We just check the time. If we have paper time, and then you can mark that gradually afterwards. So I want to do the wind and the boy, right? So in 2024, this was extract J, Friedman's third phase, for example, of the story. So similar questions, but differently set, right? Um, I'll just read the extract to you quickly. Oh, he's no trouble, said Josine with reply. That's now his grandmother. They began to laugh at his third face. Almost overnight, he turned into a tall, spindly-legged, graceful gazelle with large, grave eyes. Look at the description here. There was an odd musical lilt to his speech when he teased. Or he was up to mischief. He was naughty. He moved his head on his long, thin neck from side to side like a cobra. It was he who became the king of kings of all the boys in this area. He could turn his hand to anything and made the best wire cars with their wheels of shoe polished tins. All his movements were neat, was compact, was decisive, and for his age, he was a boy who knew his own mind. They laughed at his knowingness and certainty on all things, for he was like the grandmother who had a flaming youth all her own too. Sejosinye had scandalized the whole village in the days of good morals by leaving her own village ward to live with a married man in Gasafete Malomo ward. So there you have more context for setting, right? She won him from his wife and married him, and then they lived down the scandal in the way only natural queens can. Even in old age, she was still impressive. She sailed through the village, her head in the air, with a quiet, almost expressionless face. That means pride, she wouldn't care. Eh? So if we go to question 2 of question 5. So question 5 to 1. Here they refer you to line 1. So if we go to line 1. Oh, he's no trouble, she would reply. They ask you, what does this line tell us about her state of mind? So the analysis of the question again. What is going through her mind? What can you use to describe her words, her actions, her emotions, or what would you have to say about her? So I'll give you about a minute just to answer that quickly. That means 2 marks, and you have to substantiate your answer. Okay, can we continue? It's been a minute. So 5 to 1 would refer to the state of mind of Sejosina's, which is the grandma, right? So what does she feel like? So you can put down there, jot down, she's at a feeling of content. And now the extension of the question is saying substantiate your answer. So thereby you would say she does not see her grandson Friedman as burdensome as the villagers do. So he was very naughty. So basically her view of how she sees him or how the villagers saw him. Right? Then I move on to question 2. To whom does they refer to? I don't think I'm going to elaborate a lot on this. So the question they would again refer to the characters. Who are they? The stories about this grandma, Friedman. Where do they live? In the village. Who else is involved? The villagers. So you can simply jot down the that obviously refers to your answer would read this refers or they, I quote unquote, refers to the villagers or the people of the ward. What was the name of the ward? Hasefete Lemo ward. Okay. Then 5 to 3 is also quite easy. There you have a multiple choice. We will choose the correct answer to complete the following sentence. Write only the letter of the question and next to the question number, then here's your statement or your sentence or your phrase. Friedman turned from A, you have to fill in A, B, C, or D, in the second phase into a graceful gazelle. So if we go to line 3 and you are unsure, there's a description of what was odd, being teased, mischievous, his description of his attitude turning his neck from side to side, how he's viewed, he's the king of kings. So he's the cool guy of all the boys, right? So back to the question here. So he's either a toddler, he's a teenager, or he's a newborn or a grown up. I think that's really easy. Give you 10 seconds for that one. I'll just to guide you that answer there. He must have been a toddler. He's not a teenager yet. He's not a newborn. He's not an adult. So therefore it must be answer A. Then 5 to 4. There they say refer to the lines. Refer to lines 4 and 5. He moved his head side to side like a cobra. So this question is based on figure of speech. So you have to identify the figure of speech, and when the analysis is meaning, that means you have to elaborate on what you say it is. So if we go to line 4 and line 5, for example, there was an odd musical load to his speech when he teased was up to mischief. He moved his head on his long, thin neck from side to side like a cobra. It was he who became king of kings and all the boys in this area, right? So if you look here, where's my cursor? Find my cursor. All right, here we go. So it was line 4. He moved his head from side to side like a cobra. So that's the giveaway here in terms of if you're struggling with a metaphor or a simile, right? A direct comparison or indirect comparison. So therefore, this answer would obviously be, which you will write down now, give you a minute or two for that. And then I also need you to explain B. Explain why the figure of speech is relevant in this extract. What makes it so relevant? What can you do to support this? So I'll give you a minute to answer that quickly. So if we look at identifying the figure of speech, 5 to 4, moving is it like a cobra, what can we draw from this? Is it a simile? Is it a metaphor? Is it personification? Is it exaggeration like hyperbole? Is there sound devices like an onomatopoeia? So we will go with a simile because the word like is being used. So your answer there would be a simile. And then more important for your other 2 marks, which conclude this question to 3 marks, which is explain why is this figure of speech being used. So now let's unravel this question. If you say it's a simile, what are we comparing Friedman's signaling of his head or his movement to? So in this case, it is being linked to a cobra. So why would the cobra move its head side to side? So obviously, in this case, your answer would link to the cobra's movement before it signals danger. So there's danger involved here, and this cobra is aware. That is what Friedman's being compared to. Now, why can I say this for an additional mark? I can say Friedman's movements indicate that he is about to be mischievous, he's about to be naughty, he's about to perform a naughty act, which will have a huge impact. And that is how we can score 2 marks for that answer. Then I want to move on to 5 and 5. So if we go to line 6 and 8, line 6 to 8, open my notes quickly. Line 6 to 8, it says, I think that's where he makes wire cars from shoe polytons, right? Yes. So this is an important question. I want you to underline by 5 to 5, A and B, what tone. So I want you to underline the word tone and the word why use this tone. Why use this tone? So on the right-hand side, the analysis, they describe the feeling or the atmosphere that's being created based on the character and the context. And then the second is you have to reason why you say that this is the tone or that is the words of description that you use for the atmosphere. All right. So if I go back to line 6 to 8 here, 6 to 8, worry about where the next one is going to come from. But how? Apologies. Sorry. I don't think I got it. Line 6 to 8. Who became king of kings of all the boys in this area? He could turn his hand to anything and made the best wire cars with the wheels of shoe polished tins. When all his movements were neat, it was compact, it was decisive, and for his age, he was a boy who knew his own mind. Question: what tone would the narrator use here, and why would the narrator use this tone? I'll give you another minute or two for that. 2 minutes? 1 minute should be fine. 2, 5. Why the tone? What tone and why the tone? So you can just check your answers with me, what you've jot down there as an answer. So I'll start with what tone I've used. I would go with, is it admirable? Do you admire Friedman? Is it an appreciating tone? Is it a tone of appreciative or being appreciative? Is it an approving tone? Do you agree? Do you lean into it? Are you okay with it, right? And then 525B, now I have to explain why. So why would I select that tone? If I say it is, I admire Friedman, then I should say I'm impressed with what? I'm impressed with Freeman's skills. I'm impressed with how creative he can be, how innovative he can be. I'm impressed with his talent. Okay, so I am reasoning why I admire Friedman, right? Then 5 to 6, explain why he is given this name. To analyze to analyze the question, sorry, on the right hand side. Reason or give detail of the evidence, reflect based on the action of the character. So in this case, why was he given this name? If we just reflect back, they were in hospital. There's this grandma Sejusina with this baby, or she was there, and they did not know, they didn't have a name, or she didn't have a name for him, and she admired this doctor, and she named Friedman after the doctor, right? So, in the reason to explain this, was she given, why was he given this name, right? So she names him after the doctor, which is Dr. Friedman, and that's for 2 marks, right? Always bear in mind the mark allocation. What happened? Why would she if you just take this out of context right now, if you name something or a person or a thing after something, then there's a link. So, and I'm sure most of the case it's something good. So in this case, this doctor went out of his way um to help with the birth of this baby, right? So your answer would read, she names him after the doctor, Dr. Friedman, who went out of his way because how was the doctor towards the grandma? He was very friendly. And also she admired him. Can you see how this ties to the tone? It was an admirable character. So she admired her commitment to the unborn baby, right? So you can extend it to that sense as well. Then I want to go to question 5 to 7. What is the lines 15 and 16? What does this reveal about the grandmother's character? So when you look at this, I want you to tell me or write down now your answer. What was the grandmother like? What was she towards? It says here she sailed through. She was almost expressionless, or that's the type of face she had. So what was she like? What did she do? Did she care about what villagers would think about her or other people around her? So just jot down your answer there. So remember to focus on the character. I'll give you a minute there, just the character. Okay, so for 2 marks, if you're not done yet, I think I might run a little bit out of time, but I don't want to rush anyone or myself. But 5 to 7 there. What does the reveal about the character? So what can we use about Sejucina's character? So what was she like? You can pin down or jot down for yourself there. She is confident. She was a proud grandmother and she was carefree. You can add synonyms to that if you like. And then to extend that for 2 marks, she lived her life with no regrets. She couldn't care what people think about her. Also, she's not troubled about what villagers think about her. There's also a beautiful description in the story whereby she walked through the village and they chitter chatter about her. And she used to grow her own crops, she was independent, etc. So you can use that in context and add or fulfill this style of question, right? Then 5 to 8, let's just state why the following statement is true or false. In this case, they tell you it is true. So you need to change one word to make this true. Friedman is the son of Sejucina's firstborn daughter. So he's the son of Sejusina's firstborn daughter. Did she have daughters? How many did she have? Is it the first? Is it the last? Is it the eldest? Is it the youngest? So in this case, there must have been. I mean, he is the baby or the grandchild. So hereby we'll go with he's the youngest. Sorry, Sejusina's youngest last-born daughter, and we all know that she worked away and sent money home so that you could buy this bicycle, right? So that would be the youngest or the last born daughter. And then lastly on this little short story, I want to conclude with 5 to 9. So now I need to consider this short story as a whole. So here, Friedman has a wonderful childhood. You can think of your own childhood right now. If you say your childhood is wonderful, you're going to obviously think back now. What made it so wonderful? So here you're linking it to events or things, what people said about you that made this so wonderful. If you tend to disagree that Friedman's childhood was not so wonderful, I'm changing the question now and I'm taking you back to your own childhood that was not so wonderful, then obviously you will think of unpleasant events, of unpleasant things people said about you, or unpleasant context that you find yourself in. So right here, this is the same thing you do. Friedman has a wonderful childhood. What good aspects can we pin to this? So if I say yes, then I'm going to use context of the story to substantiate 2 or 3 things that made his childhood wonderful, or how he was seen, or what was said about him. If you say no, then you have to substantiate the opposite of not wonderful. Okay? So I'll give you a minute or two. I think I'll give you 2 minutes for this one quickly. Everyone, I think we'll just wrap it up. So if we look at saying yes, Friedman has a wonderful. So remember, you have an option here now to discuss your view. Your view, you've read the story or any story, and you need to fetch context now. You need to fetch evidence in the story that you can tie to. So if I say yes, for example, you can jot down 3 core points there. If I say yes, for example, Friedman allowed to engage in playment or playful activities. So he was allowed to play wherever he went. He was a playful boy, right? Second point there, then he could explore his surroundings. He wasn't told where not to go, for example. So he could go anywhere he wanted to in the given time of his free time or playtime, right? And then third pointer there, he's not the only child in the village, or per se, he is the only child in the village who actually owns a bicycle. That's why he was also known or seen as he's the king of the boys. Now, if I tend to agree that his childhood was not so wonderful, sorry, I'm rushing now, then that means what experience can I link here that did not make or could not make his childhood so wonderful? So I think I'll start off with his mother. Did his mother live with him? Yes or no? His mother did not. But does he experience living with his mother like most of us do, or most of the 12 candidates, if not your guardians, etc.? So he does not experience his biological mother's love. So that means that's one pointer for not having a wonderful childhood. Then second pointer, um, as a young boy, he had a lot of responsibilities. So yeah, I can extend Friedman had a lot of responsibilities. I would say as a child, he had to run errands for his grandmother, for example. So she'll send him to go fetch sugar, etc., or flour, whatever. Right? And then the third point um, is look at the conclusion of the story. He has a tragic death. So the third pointer there would be he dies tragically as a young age. And that vicious description of the truck that so I think, Ms. Harta, I think I'll conclude there unless I have more time to continue with rejection.